Hello and welcome to the latest episode of The Global in the Granite State, a program of the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire. Thank you to all of our returning listeners for your dedication and to our new audience members for taking the time to engage in the global conversation. For those who do not yet know, or just maybe have forgotten, my name is Tim Horgan, and I am the Executive Director of the World Affairs Council of New Hampshire, a nonprofit, nonpartisan, community-supported organization dedicated to highlighting important global issues for our global audiences. If you have not yet visited our website, check out wacnh.org for additional global resources and to show your support for this important work. As a membership-based community-supported organization, we could not do this work without the strong support of our members, donors, and sponsors. You provide the critical resources necessary for us to continue to bring these unique opportunities to lead the global conversation. It remains clear that these discussions are filling a critical need as audiences continue to grow throughout the year. A special thank you to our series sponsor, McLean Middleton, for their continued support of this podcast and other World Affairs Council of New Hampshire initiatives. We appreciate your community leadership and the example you set for others. McLean Middleton is one of New England's premier full-service law firms with over 115 attorneys throughout offices in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. McLean Middleton's attorneys have been providing trusted legal services to businesses throughout the region for over 100 years. Learn more at mclean.com. Now, on with the show. Past 250 or so years, the United States of America and the United Kingdom have experienced some real highs and lows in the transatlantic relationship. The first 40 years or so were a bit rocky, with the American Revolution, that War of 1812, which culminated with the British troops setting the White House on fire. That's right. However, starting in the 1870s, relations began to warm, and the 20th century saw a major strengthening of ties based on shared values and a desire to support each other throughout World War I, II, and beyond.
It's obviously been a very long relationship since the founding of the United States. Obviously, it began with a period of conflict, but over time, with a few bumps in the road, has evolved into the closest of alliances, across security, defense, intelligence, trade and industry, culture, any area that you can name.
That is Consul General David Clay, head diplomat stationed at the British Consul General in Boston. We are honored to have had the opportunity to speak with him on July 7th about the long-standing relationship between our two countries, on the eve of the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 1776.
I think the relationship is in brilliant shape at the moment, and I'm really excited to see where it goes over the next couple of years, particularly around tech. I think that's a real area that we'll be working on over the next couple of years. So I'm feeling really, really positive about the relationship and the potential to take it to the next level over the next few years.
Of course, for anyone listening to this today, the relationship between these two countries has always been strong. Built around a shared history, value system, and cross-cultural connections, this special relationship has endured many major global challenges of all shapes and sizes. By approaching this partnership from a point of mutual respect, they have worked together to shape some of the most important global institutions, agreements, and events of the past 150 or so years. Some of the highlights include:
during the Cold War, enterprises like the Berlin airlift were really positive examples of how the UK and the US worked together to ensure that there was security on the continent of Europe. And that positive US contribution and that UK-US partnership on European security has been crucial beyond the Cold War and the Berlin airlift, as an example. Looking at things like the Western Balkans, UK-US collaboration there, I think, has been really important. Also, US-UK collaboration on technology, the development of the technologies that we rely on in the 21st century. Gene editing, some of the technologies around missiles. I think there have been so many examples of that great technological partnership.
In addition, New Hampshire and the United Kingdom share two very important connections in terms of setting the course of global events. The deepest connection comes from World War II, when former New Hampshire Governor John Winnet was named U.S. Ambassador to the UK, amidst the horrors of the Blitz in London. Ambassador Winnet was a strong supporter of the British people throughout his time and refused to leave the city for the safety of the countryside.
I've read his account of his time at the embassy, how he decided to stay in the centre of London rather than escaping to the countryside or returning back to the US, which I think sort of symbolises how the US stood by the UK in its hour of need back during the Second World War. Personally, I have a huge admiration for what he did, both in the way he stood side by side with the other residents of London facing the Blitz, but also how he ensured that the communications between the UK and the US were as close, as comprehensive as possible during that really critical time. And that's the essence of what an ambassador is there to do, is to strengthen that communication, to spot opportunities, to make sure there's no misunderstandings on either side and work for the benefit of both countries, which I think is what he did. So yeah, I completely agree. He's a great figure in the history of US-UK diplomacy.
The second highlight, and perhaps even more consequential, was the work done at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire in 1944 to craft a new economic system from the ashes of World War II. While the United States, the United Kingdom, and 43 other countries negotiated this major achievement, New Hampshire welcomed the delegations with open arms. More recently, however, the transatlantic partnership has risen to meet many of the challenges of the 21st century as well, including the close military collaboration in the wake of the September 11th attacks, where the United Kingdom was the first country in NATO to reach out and pledge their support to helping the United States respond to this unprecedented attack.
I was on stage the other week with a Marines general, and he told me that in his career he hadn't gone into battle without his British colleagues as his side. And I thought that was a very powerful example of that close military cooperation across the whole range of recent conflicts, Iraq and Afghanistan being the two that immediately bring to mind.
Of course, this special relationship goes well beyond the military connections to include a wide array of economic, cultural, and values-based ties. As the United States has looked to redefine its economic relationship to individual countries across the world, it is important to start our conversation here. As the first country to agree to a new economic framework with the Trump administration, we wanted to dive into where the relationship is headed now.
This is my top priority as Consul General, is to develop that trade and investment relationship between the UK and the US. That involves supporting British businesses that want to export or invest in the US, but also supporting US companies that are keen to invest in the UK. And the headline numbers of the US-UK economic relationship are pretty impressive. So we have $1.5 trillion invested in each other's economies, a trading investment worth $418 billion, and 2.5 million jobs across both countries that rely on that US-UK economic relationship. So I think it's an incredibly strong and positive picture. I think looking at the sectors across New England that I'm particularly excited about, so tech writ large is a big priority. That includes sort of frontier areas like quantum, like bioengineering, but also advanced manufacturing as well, and which is an area where I know New Hampshire has great strengths. So I'm really keen to see that over the next few years. I think we've been doing some really interesting work around climate tech and ocean technologies as well, particularly looking at some of the defence applications. And I think developing those sectors will be a priority of mine over the next couple of years.
So, whether we are talking about the advanced bioengineering work that the Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing Initiative is undertaking in the Manchester, New Hampshire mill yards, which, ironically enough, were originally based on designs from the mills in Manchester, England, which is another unique connection, or the thousands of people employed by British companies such as BAE Systems across the state, there are many opportunities for connections and growth. However, with the signing of the United States-United Kingdom Economic Prosperity Deal, it is important for people to be aware of how this will affect the trading relationship and future investments.
Just a quick reminder on the timeline. So a general agreement was reached in May, and on the 16th of June, the President and the Prime Minister announced the implementation of the deal at the G7 summit in Canada. The key sectors that are included in the deal include automobiles, aerospace, steel, and agricultural products, particularly around ethanol and beef. The key measures are reducing the tariffs on automobiles from 27.5% to 10%, On aerospace, moving that from 10% to zero. On steel and aluminium, that's now at 25% rather than 50%, with a commitment to work towards abolishing duties on steel and aluminium. They're the real key elements of the deal that was signed on the 16th of June.
As with any trade relationship, there remains work to be done in order to satisfy both sides. Key areas for further agreement include working towards a 0% tariff on core steel products and access for pharmaceuticals and other industries targeted for Section 232 trade investigations, also known as national security-related tariffs.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we are still working on with the US administration. So I think you'll understand if I don't go into where the negotiations are standing at the moment. But I think it's a great deal for the UK. We're the first country to reach an agreement with the administration. And I think it partly reflects the balanced nature of the economic relationship between the US and the UK. Unlike many other countries, the trade relationship is very balanced. There's no big surpluses on either side. And hopefully that will allow us to continue to develop the economic relationship. There's clearly more work that we want to do in certain areas to strengthen the trading relationship. Further talks continue with the White House to achieve that. As I said, there are clearly other sectors that we're looking to see positive developments on. Also working to develop a closer partnership on tech as well, which our ambassador in Washington has highlighted as a sort of a key priority and key ambition for the UK.
According to the Office of the United States Trade Representative, in 2024, the U.S. maintained an $11.9 billion trade surplus with the United Kingdom, up 17.4% or $1.8 billion over 2023 trade. Despite this, on April 2nd, in announcing the reciprocal tariffs, President Trump placed a 10% tariff on all goods coming from the United Kingdom, up from previous years where they paid the most favored nation rate of 2.5%, outside of sector-specific tariffs, such as on steel. While the term unfair is in the eye of the beholder, at the end of the day, this is the state of play. One area of contention for the United States is the digital services tax, something I had not heard of before.
So you've had the tax since 2020, and it imposes a 2% levy on revenues from social media platforms, from internet search engines, and online marketplaces that derive profits and revenue from UK users. It only comes into force if you go above a certain threshold, so it's not imposed on the small list of companies. The digital services tax is part of that discussion. But as I said previously, this is kind of under negotiation, so I'm not really able to talk through the detail about where that negotiation stands at the moment. But I think this is a sector that we want to develop closer economic relationship with the US on.
In addition to the economic relationship, what are some of the areas that the United Kingdom would like to partner further on and more deeply with the United States?
There's a whole host of areas. I've mentioned tech a couple of times, and in areas like AI, like quantum, like bioengineering, some of those frontier technologies that we're going to need to develop over the coming years to address the challenges of the 21st century. I think there's huge potential for the US and the UK to do even more than they're doing together at the moment. The UK has the third biggest tech sector around the world after the US and China. So there's some really interesting partnerships that we can pursue, trying to bring together some of the UK's world-leading research capabilities together with the US. So I'm, particularly given where I am in Boston, I'm really excited about that part of the partnership. The other area I'll mention is on defence. AUKUS is a big priority for UK. I think it's a great example of US-UK partnership in the development of new military technology and also a demonstration of our long-term strategic partnership across the world, but including in the Pacific.
One of the most important parts of the defense relationship is both countries' involvement in NATO. Just a few weeks ago, there was a NATO summit that saw some major announcements about the future of the alliance's posture.
We just had a NATO summit in the last couple of days, which agreed very ambitious sort of set of targets for defence expenditure across NATO to bring up capability to face the threats across the world, but including certainly in Europe. The UK's commitment to NATO remains steadfast, already spending above 2% on defence, and have an ambition to get to 2.5% by 2027, to 3% by the next Parliament, and as outlined in the NATO communique, bring that up to 5% by 2035. Reading through that communique demonstrates that the UK and the US share a commitment to NATO and also share us for Ukraine's sovereignty as well. There's a huge amount in common. The UK continues to be committed to playing its part in NATO operations around the world, working closely with our US partners.
It has been interesting to watch President Trump's shifting tone on the war in Ukraine as he becomes more and more frustrated with President Putin's unwillingness to bring this war to an end. However, many people actually identify China as the bigger threat to the global order in many different areas. So, where does the UK and Chinese relationship stand at this point?
The UK has just completed an audit of its relationship with China. I encourage you and your listeners to take a look at that. Sort of sets out the different strands of the UK's relationship with China. And it's clearly a mixed picture. On the one hand, the audit is very clear about the challenges that China presents, including on issues like espionage, economic security, and human rights. But it also outlines the opportunities, the extent of the UK's trade relationship with China. China is our third largest trading partner around the world. There's also clearly benefits in continuing developing the scientific partnership with China. So I think the UK's approach is to look at those different strands and have different approaches in different areas, certainly being robust when it comes to defence of UK security writ large, but also cooperating where it makes sense to cooperate.
Another major area to understand the UK's position on is the ongoing wars in the Middle East, mainly the multiple wars that Israel has engaged in since October 7th, 2023.
As far as the conflict in Gaza is concerned, the UK has had a clear, long-standing position since the beginning of the conflict that we want to see a ceasefire, we want to see the release of the hostages, and we want to see moves towards a just and lasting two-state solution. We've also expressed our deep concern on a number of occasions about the humanitarian situation in Gaza in particular. But I think we should also remember where this conflict started, which was with Hamas attacking Israel. So I think we need to progress from that understanding, but looking to move towards a negotiated solution, towards releasing the hostages immediately and starting to make progress again toward a lasting solution, because there won't be a military solution in the long term.
Recently, concerns about Iran's nuclear activities reached a boiling point, with Israel and the United States taking military action to target nuclear facilities inside of Iran. While there are competing reports about the actual state and ambitions of the Iranian nuclear program, what was the British assessment of the threat posed, having been an initial signatory to the JCPOA, also known as the Iran nuclear deal?
The UK has long been concerned about Iran's nuclear program. The IAEA has recently found Iran to be in breach of its commitments. We saw that the US action had alleviated that threat. Our priorities now are to de-escalate, to stabilize the situation. We certainly welcome the ceasefire that has been put in place. We see that only diplomacy can really achieve a durable solution to the Iranian nuclear program. So that's where we're putting our focus as well. I should probably also add that the threat that Iran posed to Israel, I think, was real and substantial. So the language that Iran has been using to Israel is utterly unacceptable.
I will point out that the IAEA report on Iran's nuclear activities indicated that they were not in compliance with requirements since 2019, when the United States left the Iran nuclear deal. Iran maintains that the deal was first violated by the United States, reinstating sanctions outside of the formal process, and they shouldn't be held to this agreement. In addition, the IAEA indicated that Iran had given unsatisfactory answers to undeclared sites where traces of nuclear material were found back in 2000, long believing that Iran had ended its secret nuclear weapons program in 2003. Iran not cooperating on these questions is not necessarily an indication of new findings, which they noted. While the US and the UK governments continue to pursue many of the same geopolitical goals, the real, enduring, and most powerful part of the transatlantic alliance comes down to the
people-to-people relationship between the US and the UK, which is what everything else is based upon. Coming through Boston, we have about 200,000 UK visitors every year. I don't think I've met anyone in this part of the world who hasn't got friends in the UK or hasn't visited the UK or hasn't got a son or daughter who studied in the UK. So that people-to-people relationship really remains the foundation of the relationship, and I have absolutely no doubt that that will continue to go from strength to strength over the next few years.
The World Affairs Council of New Hampshire wholeheartedly agrees that people-to-people exchanges are a major driving force of international connections, understanding, cooperation, and peace. Without a doubt, these efforts will continue to grow and shape the global conversation, and WAC&H will center itself in this space. Thank you to everyone for engaging in this month's episode of The Global in the Granite State. It is an honor to continue leading this amazing global community, and I thank you for your time and interest. I hope you will continue to share this program and many of the other World Affairs Council of New Hampshire programs with your friends, family, and colleagues. We don't always know what will change the world, but we do know that ignoring pressing global issues will not make them go away. As always, Tim Horgan is the producer, director, audio engineer, fact-checker, researcher, editor, and whatever other positive titles you would like to give him. Our theme music remains admin by A.A. Alto, and our interlude music is Motivation Drill Trap by Dello Sound. Until next month.